Welcome to the Bible Forum. I am Warren Sprouse, your host and your guide for the next 2 hours as we look at life through a biblical lens and try to solve all the world's problems in 2 hours or less. You remember the boy that was thrown off the 3-story balcony out there at the Mall of Americas? Someone started a GoFundMe page or something similar within a day or so of that event. And in less than 48 hours, they collected $400,000. That amount has continued to grow. The last number I heard was north of $700. I just wonder what that says about Americans. How much do you weigh? Talks are underway between a Berkshire-based firm called Fuel Matrix and several long-haul airlines in the UK over implementing a system that weighs passengers. Weighing could take place as passengers check in or leave their luggage at self-service bag drops, or it could happen as they pass through security scanners. The question is, why? Well, it's about fuel. It's about how much fuel these airplanes need and how much it costs. Well, maybe. The airline is highlighting the higher carbon emissions. But I think we all know it's about the money. Imagine yourself walking up, having paid your money for a ticket, walking up to get on the plane, and the person who's taking the tickets kind of looks you up and down and says, "I don't think so." I'm anticipating some fisticuffs, some fussing among the passengers over there in Great Britain. Well, if this thing works out for them, it's coming over here too. We've got a whole generation of young people grown up around this whole idea of global warming. Nobody has proven yet that there is such a thing, but it doesn't really matter anymore. It's a politically correct thing to talk about. Did you celebrate Good Friday? Today is Easter Sunday. It's Resurrection Day. It's a hallmark, a keystone in the Christian pantheon of doctrines and celebrations. Well, over in the Philippines, several Roman Catholic devotees had themselves nailed to wooden crosses in what is being described as a gory Good Friday ritual, while others flogged themselves with whips or took part in religious plays to reenact Jesus Christ's suffering. Now, if you've been around for more than about 20 minutes, you probably know this happens every Easter, happens every Good Friday. What's going on? 4 men and a woman now, some wearing crowns of twigs, were escorted by villagers dressed as Roman centurions and literally nailed to crosses on a dusty hill. Similar reenactments played out in nearby farming towns throughout northern Philippines. Thousands, including many tourists, watched the annual spectacle. The Roman Catholic Church frowns upon this, instead calling on the faithful to mark Lent with prayers and acts of charity. Now, as I mentioned, this is not a new thing. But the question becomes, what's going on? What's really behind all of this? Well, it's a combination of religious zeal and ancient ritual. Imagine 1,000 years or so ago, missionaries began teaching native Filipinos about Jesus, about his arrest by Roman soldiers, about his scourging and ultimate crucifixion. These are natives, no doubt steeped in ancient religious practices, pagan practices that are not really pleasant or nice in many cases. And now, hearing this story, they want to identify with, they want to experience the suffering of the Lord Jesus Christ, and all they know are these pagan rituals and practices of their forebears. Unable to travel to Rome and crawl up the steps, the sacred staircase, supposedly the one Jesus was made to walk on his knees carrying the cross. You read that in the scriptures, right? These faithful act out the crucifixion as a means of securing relief from the penalty of their sin. You say, oh, come on, it's not like that. That's not what it is. Consider that the Roman Church has such a doctrine. It's called an indulgence. From their literature, an indulgence is the remission before God of the temporal punishment due to sin, whose guilt has already been forgiven. That from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. A properly disposed member of the Christian faithful can obtain an indulgence under prescribed conditions through the help of the Church, which, as the minister of redemption, dispenses and applies with authority the treasury of the satisfactions of Christ and the saints. I think that's in the Old Testament somewhere, or maybe it's in an obscure New Testament book that we've never seen. An indulgence, in their parlance, is partial if it removes part of the temporal punishment due sin, or it can be plenary if it removes all punishment. The sacred steps are found in a staircase supposedly transported to Rome, a staircase with 4 places encased in gold-framed glass, supposedly places where drops of Jesus' blood fell. Traditionally, this staircase was brought to Rome by Helen, mother of Emperor Constantine, in the 4th century A.D. A staircase where a Catholic can crawl up and get this plenary indulgence, meaning that for every step that he takes, he would gain 9 years of indulgence. Okay. In the Roman system, communion is the unbloody sacrifice of Christ for sin. It is a ceremony whereby the Lord Jesus Christ is sacrificed afresh. Every time the bell tinkles, the elements become literally the body and the blood of Christ, which is then broken for you and shed the blood for you, and you ingest this. Oh, and there are replicas, holy copies of these steps in France and in Canada and in Lithuania, Rhode Island, and New York St. Patrick's Cathedral, as well as in Abruzzi, Italy. But acting out the crucifixion of Christ is an excess the Roman Church cannot abide when it's being done in the Philippines. But acting out the crucifixion of Christ in churches all over the world every time the Mass is celebrated, that's okay. And the scourging of themselves and the deprivation that they endure in order to receive some sort of blessing from God, and to have years of their time in purgatory removed, is okay. I think it has more to do with protecting the church's singular right to forgive sin than it is the protection of these deceived people. Now, I know that sounds extreme, But consider crawling up a stone staircase of 30-odd steps on your knees. For what? To avoid the punishment you deserve for sin. To have forgiveness that lasts 9 years for every step. 270 years total. Well, what happens after the 270 years? Well, the idea is that you've left this mortal coil. You died. Your body is in the grave. But your soul, your spirit is in purgatory, where you are suffering for the sins that you have committed, the sins that were not remitted through the Mass or through confession or through whatever it is the Catholic Church does to remit sin. You escape 270 years of it, but it's not over. And with all of that, they got a problem with the pseudo-pagan act of crucifixion. It seems silly. Early last Saturday, when most people were focused on elections, several enormous explosions rocked a suspected Iranian surface-to-surface missile factory on the outskirts of the town of Masyaf in northwest Syria. The satellite imagery showed that an entire complex had been destroyed. International media reports attributed the attack to the Israeli Air Force and to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The Prime Minister was speaking a day afterwards, saying that, quote, "We are continuing to operate on all fronts, including the northern one," end of quote. He added, "We are not prepared to allow someone to entrench themselves in a way that endangers Israel." Netanyahu has pursued a policy of ordering preventative military action to stop Iran's military buildup in Syria. This incident is a reminder that Iran and its radical terrorist axis are continuing attempts to build up their attack capabilities against Israel in Syria, just as they are in other areas. This is the latest reminder that the new Israeli government will have no honeymoon when it comes to dealing with Iran and its proxies in the region. Ultimately, Iran wishes to keep Israel busy around its borders with these proxy threats and on the defensive. And it appears that Israel's defense establishment is ready, no matter what the political situation in Israel. Would you like to have a new heart? Scientists in Israel unveiled a 3D print of a heart with human tissue and vessels just last Monday, calling it a first and a major medical breakthrough that advances possibilities for transplanting. Now, it remains way off in the distance whether this and when this can be applied to beings of one sort or another. But scientists hope that one day they're going to be able to produce hearts suitable for transplant into human beings, as well as patches to regenerate defective hearts. The heart produced by researchers at Tel Aviv University is about the size of that of a rabbit's. I saw pictures of it. It's about that big around. It marked the first time anyone anywhere has successfully engineered and printed an entire heart, replete with cells, blood vessels, ventricles, chambers, and all the rest of it. One of the doctors there, Tal Devere, who was the lead of this particular project, said, "People have managed to 3D print the structure of a heart in the past, but not with cells, not with blood vessels. But scientists say many challenges still remain before fully working 3D printed hearts are going to be available for transplant. Journalists were shown a 3D print of a heart about the size of a cherry at Tel Aviv University on Monday as the researchers announced their findings. Researchers must now teach the printed hearts to behave like real ones. Cells are currently able to contract, but do not yet have the ability to pump. When that is fully functional, they plan to transplant these into animals, hopefully in about a year. Maybe in 10 years, there will be organ printers in the finest hospitals of the world, and these procedures will be conducted routinely, the doctor said. Unless you're living in a van down by the river and you don't have electricity or cell phone coverage, you must be aware that there's an illegal alien problem at our southern border. But maybe you didn't know about the other illegal alien problem. More than 10,000 illegal aliens from countries designated as state sponsors of terrorism are living here in the United States, according to federal data. The countries of origin include Iran, North Korea, Syria, and the Sudan. That according to the Immigration Reform Law Institute, which referenced the data in a study reported by Breitbart. The illegal aliens either have been ordered deported or have pending deportation orders despite remaining in the United States. A total of more than 1.7 million of them are here, despite having been ordered out, having pending deportation orders. They're still here. The executive director of this organization, a man by the name of Dale Wilcox, speaking to Breitbart News Tonight radio program on Sirius Radio, suggested this to be a very dangerous situation. He says we have 10,000 aliens. Some of them are criminals, and that's why they've been ordered out. He said you could have some that might have come into the country illegally at some point. However, they've committed crimes while here, and now they are being ordered removed. Of the 10,000 from terror-sponsoring countries, about 6,000 are from Iran. Wilcox noted that California, a sanctuary state that shields illegal aliens from federal immigration authorities, has the largest population of Iranians outside Iran. That's just in California. We learned this week that public health officials are telling us that rural counties across the Midwest and the West are becoming new battlegrounds in the war against syphilis. No, it's not among young people. No, it's not among homosexuals per se. It's among a bunch of old men. Carolyn Schrage runs a health clinic in Joplin, Missouri. She started hearing about something called the Domino's Gang, and she thought it had something to do with pizza. She was surprised to learn it was about homosexuals, men in their 60s and 70s, engaging in sex with one another, apparently in response to who won the game or didn't. Dominoes. Men who eventually started showing up at her clinic, fully infected with AIDS. You do know that the first letter in this acrostic is A, right? It stands for acquired. You have to go out and get it. It doesn't come to you. In Missouri, the total number of syphilis patients has more than quadrupled just in the last 7 years, going from 425 cases to 1,896 cases last year. Almost half of those are outside the major population centers and typical STD hotspots like Kansas City, St. Louis, and its adjacent county. Syphilis cases surged at least 8-fold during that period in the rest of the state. Pregnant women, young men, teens are all part of the rapidly growing number of syphilis patients coming to Choices Medical Services Clinic in the rural southwestern corner of the state. She can barely keep the antibiotic treatment for syphilis, something called penicillin G benzathine, stocked on her shelves. This is what happens when all the taboos are removed from dangerous and destructive behaviors. Removed in the quest for what? Liberty, freedom, equality, license. Now, you do know that the ancient taboos against all of this sort of thing exist for a reason, right? When you were a child, your mama said, "Don't eat that bug." There was a reason for that. And there's a reason we're told not to participate in this. Of course, today, if you say stuff like that, you're a bigot, albeit a healthy one. Recently, a federal appeals court has rejected an atheist demand that the United States House of Representatives allow him to open a session with a secular prayer. Now, please don't ask me to define a secular prayer. I can't do it. Prayers by nature are offered to at least a deity of some sort. I realize there's a prayer for judgment at the courthouse, but it's drawn from this idea. The judge ruled that under the Constitution's separation of powers, Congress can establish its own rules. Dan Baker, the founder of Freedom from Religion Foundation, former ordained Christian minister, had been invited by Representative Mark Pocan of Wisconsin, a Democrat, to offer a secular prayer. I have no idea what a secular prayer is. Who are you praying to? I don't want to know. Barker explained he would appeal to a higher power, something he calls human wisdom. Human wisdom is a higher power. It listens to prayers and can effect solutions to your problems. No? No. His plan, however, was rejected by the office of the House chaplain, who initially thought it was a joke. The chaplain argued Barker was ordained by a religious organization that he himself, Barker, no longer supports. Barker, in turn, sued the chaplain. His name is Patrick Conroy, along with others, and appealed to the Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia when his complaint was rejected by the Washington District Court. The appeals court explained that the House has begun each legislative day with a prayer since 1789, and the Supreme Court found the practice compatible with the Establishment Clause. Quoting, although a House-appointed chaplain has traditionally delivered the opening prayer, at some time in the past, the House began allowing members to nominate other individuals to give a prayer as a guest chaplain. But the House's requirement that prayers must be religious nonetheless precludes Barker from doing the very thing he's asking us to order: deliver a secular prayer. In other words, even if, as Barker alleges, he was actually excluded simply for being an atheist, he is entitled to exactly none of the relief he seeks. We could not order Conroy to allow Barker to deliver a secular invocation because the House permissibly limits the opening prayer to religious prayers. They don't have to do it. You don't have to let anybody pray. Barker has therefore failed to state a claim for which relief can be granted. The court cited the rule-making clause of Article 1, Section 5 of the United States Constitution as one for the home team. We've got a lot more to talk about tonight. We're just getting started. We're going to talk about the decline of Christianity in Great Britain right after this break. Stay tuned.